During a routine visit to her brother-in-law Marshall's house, I couldn't help but overhear him boasting about his recent purchase of a luxury sports car. My jaw nearly hit the floor. How could he afford such an extravagant splurge? Something didn't add up. Marshall had always been a bit flashy with his spending habits, but this seemed excessive, even for him. As the executor of my late sister's will and the trustee of my daughter Lena's college fund, I had entrusted him with a significant responsibility. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach as doubts crept into my mind. Later that evening, I found myself poring over Lena's tuition statements, searching for any irregularities. To my dismay, I discovered that several payments had been delayed or missed entirely. Confronting Marshall seemed like the logical next step, but a part of me dreaded the potential confrontation. The following weekend, I mustered the courage to broach the subject during our family brunch. "Marshall, I noticed some discrepancies with Lena's tuition payments," I began, my tone deliberately level. "Is everything okay with her college fund?" Marshall's expression hardened, and he waved off my concerns with a dismissive hand. "Just a clerical error, Ivy. Nothing to worry about." His nonchalant response did little to alleviate my growing suspicions. In fact, it only fueled my determination to uncover the truth. Over the next few weeks, I embarked on a discreet investigation, meticulously tracking Marshall's expenditures and lifestyle changes. The more I dug, the more glaring the red flags became. Extravagant vacations, luxury car payments, and a sudden penchant for high-end designer attire, all of which seemed far beyond his means as a middle manager at a small firm. Confronting him directly seemed futile, as he would likely brush off my concerns once again. I needed concrete evidence to back up my suspicions. That's when I decided to enlist the help of a private investigator, a decision that would ultimately unravel a web of deceit far more tangled than I could have ever imagined. The private investigator's findings left me reeling. Marshall had indeed been embezzling from Lena's college fund, siphoning off thousands to finance his lavish lifestyle. The evidence was damning. Bank statements, wire transfers, even video footage of him withdrawing cash at various ATMs. My heart ached at the thought of my sister's hard-earned savings being squandered by the very person entrusted to safeguard it. I knew I needed to confront Marshall, but a part of me feared his reaction. Would he deny the allegations? Lash out in anger? Or worse, attempt to manipulate me with his silver-tongued lies? I had to tread carefully. The opportunity presented itself during Lena's birthday dinner. As we gathered around the table, Marshall arrived fashionably late, sporting a brand-new designer suit that likely cost more than my monthly salary. "Wow, Marshall, that's quite the outfit," I remarked, unable to hide the sarcasm in my voice. "Must have cost a pretty penny." He flashed a smug grin, oblivious to the weight of my words. What can I say? I like to treat myself every now and then. I bit my tongue, suppressing the urge to confront him then and there. Instead, I shifted the conversation to Lena's tuition, feigning concern over the missed payments. Marshall's demeanor changed in an instant. His eyes narrowed, and his jaw clenched. "Like I told you before, it's just a clerical error. The university's accounting department is a mess." Lena, sensing the tension, spoke up. "Uncle Marshall, is everything okay with my college fund? Mom's been worried sick." He forced a reassuring smile. "Of course, sweetheart, your aunt is just being a worrywart. You know how she gets." The dinner progressed in an uncomfortable silence, punctuated by Marshall's occasional boastful remarks about his latest acquisitions. Each word further solidified my determination to expose his deceit. In the days that followed, I meticulously compiled the evidence gathered by the private investigator, organizing it into an airtight case. I also confided in my son Grant, seeking his technical expertise in gathering additional proof. Grant's eyes widened as I laid out the facts before him. "Uncle Marshall did what?" "That's low, even for him." I nodded solemnly. "I know. But we need to be strategic about how we handle this. If we confront him directly, he'll likely deny everything and try to discredit us." Grant pondered for a moment before offering a suggestion. "What if we bait him into admitting it himself? Like, have him explain some bogus banking issue related to Lena's account and secretly record his response?" A slow smile spread across my face. It was a risky plan, but one that could potentially yield the irrefutable evidence I needed to bring Marshall to justice. With Grant's technical expertise and my determination, we set the trap, eagerly awaiting the moment when Marshall's greed would be his undoing. With the evidence stacked against Marshall, I knew it was time to take decisive action. The thought of confronting him filled me with a mix of trepidation and determination. This man had not only betrayed my trust, but had also robbed my daughter of her future security. I arranged for a private investigator, Tony, to meet me at a neutral location, a quiet cafe downtown. As I awaited his arrival, my mind raced with 1,000 different scenarios, each more unsettling than the last. Tony's gruff voice snapped me back to reality. "Ivy, good to see you." He slid into the booth across from me, a thick manila envelope in hand. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. "What have you uncovered?" Tony wasted no time in laying out the damning facts. Bank statements, wire transfers, even surveillance footage. It was all there, irrefutable proof of Marshall's deceit. With each revelation, my anger grew, simmering just beneath the surface. "This should be more than enough to nail him," Tony concluded, sliding the envelope across the table. I ran my fingers over the smooth surface, my mind reeling. "Thank you, Tony. You've been invaluable." As I left the cafe, the weight of the evidence felt like a lead weight in my hands. But it also steeled my resolve. Marshall had to be stopped, and I was the only one who could do it. The confrontation played out a few days later, during a family gathering at Marshall's house. I waited until everyone had settled in, then cleared my throat to command the room's attention. "Marshall, I think it's time we addressed the elephant in the room," I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil raging within. He quirked an eyebrow, feigning ignorance. "And what might that be, dear sister-in-law?" I let the silence hang for a moment, then dropped the bombshell. "I know you've been embezzling from Lena's college fund." A hush fell over the room as all eyes turned to Marshall. His expression darkened, his lips curling into a sneer. "That's a serious accusation, Ivy. I hope you have proof to back it up." Without a word, I slid the manila envelope across the coffee table, its contents spilling out for all to see. Marshall's face drained of color as he scanned the damning evidence. "How could you, Marshall?" My voice trembled with barely contained fury. "That money was meant for Lena's education, her future." He lashed out, his eyes wild with panic. "You don't understand. I needed that money. My business was failing, and I had to keep up appearances." The room erupted into chaos, with various family members voicing their outrage and disbelief. In the midst of the commotion, I caught Lena's gaze, her eyes brimming with tears of betrayal. Marshall's excuses fell on deaf ears as the gravity of his actions sank in. He had not only stolen from his own flesh and blood, but had also shattered the sacred trust bestowed upon him. As the dust settled, I knew that this was just the beginning. Marshall would face the full consequences of his greed, both legal and personal, and I would be there, unwavering in my determination to ensure justice was served. In the aftermath of Marshall's exposure, a palpable tension lingered in the air. Family gatherings that were once filled with laughter and warmth now carried an undercurrent of mistrust and betrayal. Whispers and sidelong glances trailed Marshall wherever he went, a constant reminder of his disgraceful actions. I, however, refused to let his transgressions overshadow the unity of our family. Determined to regain control of the situation, I took strategic steps to undermine Marshall's credibility further and solidify my position as the moral authority. It started subtly, with casual conversations at family dinners and get-togethers. I would innocently inquire about Marshall's latest purchases or extravagant trips, feigning genuine curiosity while subtly planting seeds of doubt in others' minds. "That's a lovely new watch, Marshall," I remarked one evening, eyeing the glittering timepiece adorning his wrist. "It must have cost a pretty penny." He puffed out his chest, oblivious to my veiled jabs. "Only the best for a man of my stature." I nodded, a tight smile plastered on my face. "I see. And how's the business doing these days? Well enough to support such luxurious tastes?" Marshall's bravado faltered for a split second, but he quickly regained his composure. "Never better, dear sister-in-law. Never better." As the weeks passed, I continued to subtly undermine his credibility, carefully orchestrating situations that would expose his lavish spending habits and questionable financial decisions. In tandem with these calculated maneuvers, I reached out to trusted family members, confiding in them my growing concerns about Marshall's behavior. One by one, I rallied them to my cause, solidifying a united front against his deceit. Aunt Judith, ever the voice of reason, was among the first to lend her support. "You're doing the right thing, Ivy," she assured me during one of our private conversations. "That scoundrel needs to be held accountable for his actions." Even Lena and Grant, initially hesitant to escalate the conflict, eventually came around, recognizing the necessity of our collective efforts to ensure justice was served. With each strategic move, I could see Marshall's grip on the family's trust slipping. His once boastful demeanor withered under the weight of our scrutiny, replaced by a nervous, guarded facade. Yet, for all his flaws and misdeeds, Marshall remained a formidable opponent, his silver tongue ever ready to weave intricate webs of deceit and manipulation. It became clear that more decisive action was needed, a final, irrefutable blow that would shatter his facade and leave him with nowhere to hide. That's when Grant's technical expertise proved invaluable once again. Together, we devised a plan to bait Marshall into admitting his wrongdoings on a recorded phone call, under the guise of seeking his assistance with a banking issue related to Lena's account. The trap was set, and as Marshall unwittingly took the bait, his every word was captured, a damning testament to his greed and betrayal. With the recording in hand, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. The evidence was now undeniable, and Marshall's downfall was all but assured. It was time to strike the final blow and ensure that justice was served, once and for all. The trap was set, and Marshall took the bait hook, line, and sinker. With Grant's technical expertise, we had managed to record a phone conversation in which Marshall admitted to embezzling from Lena's college fund. "It's just a temporary solution, Ivy," Marshall's voice crackled through the speaker, laced with desperation. "My business hit a rough patch, but once things pick up, I'll pay every penny back, I swear." I schooled my features into a mask of concern, careful not to give away the game. "I understand, Marshall, but you know how important this fund is for Lena's future. We can't afford any more mishaps." His tone shifted, taking on a placating quality. Of course. You have my word. This won't happen again." With each falsehood that tumbled from his lips, my anger simmered beneath the surface. This man, entrusted with safeguarding my daughter's future, had betrayed us in the most despicable way. As the call ended, I glanced at Grant, who gave me a subtle nod. The evidence was irrefutable, a damning indictment of Marshall's greed and deceit. The next step was to confront him head-on, in front of the entire family. I steeled my resolve, knowing that this would be the moment of reckoning, the final nail in the coffin of his web of lies. It was during a large family gathering, ostensibly to celebrate Aunt Judith's birthday, that I made my move. As the festivities were in full swing, I cleared my throat, commanding the room's attention. "Before we continue, there's something I need to address," I began, my voice steady and unwavering. Marshall shot me a wary glance, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Without preamble, I pressed play on the recording, filling the room with the damning evidence of his admission. A hush fell over the gathered crowd as Marshall's words echoed through the speakers, his every falsehood laid bare. "You see, Marshall?" I gestured towards the stunned faces of our family members. "This is what your greed has wrought. Not only did you betray my trust, but you robbed your own niece of her future." Marshall's face contorted into a mask of rage as the realization dawned on him. "How dare you? That recording is a fabrication, a twisted lie." I shook my head, unmoved by his outburst. "Deny it all you want, but the evidence speaks for itself." As if on cue, Grant stepped forward, brandishing a thick folder brimming with bank statements, wire transfers, and other damning financial records. "We have more than just the recording, Uncle Marshall," he stated, his voice laced with disgust. "Every penny you stole, every lie you told, it's all here, in black and white." The room erupted into a cacophony of outrage, with various family members hurling accusations and insults at the disgraced Marshall. In the midst of the chaos, I caught Lena's eye, her expression a mix of pain and relief. Marshall, cornered and exposed, lashed out in a desperate bid to salvage what little credibility he had left. But his pleas fell on deaf ears, drowned out by the collective fury of those he had wronged. As the dust settled, the family's verdict was unanimous. Marshall would face the full consequences of his actions, both legal and social. He had not only squandered our trust, but had also shattered the bonds that held our family together. In that moment, as I watched Marshall's world crumble around him, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. Justice had been served, and the price of his greed had been laid bare for all to see. The family meeting was a powder keg, emotions running high as Marshall's misdeeds were laid bare before everyone. The air was thick with tension, each accusation and condemnation adding fuel to the already raging fire. Marshall, backed into a corner, lashed out with a desperation born of despair. "You're all being manipulated," he spat, his eyes wild and unfocused. "This is nothing but a twisted ploy by Ivy to turn you against me." I remained steadfast, unmoved by his desperate attempts to deflect blame. "The evidence speaks for itself, Marshall. Your greed and betrayal have been exposed, plain as day." Aunt Judith, ever the voice of reason, stepped forward, her normally kind eyes hardened with disappointment. "Enough of your lies, boy. You've disgraced this family with your actions, and it's time to face the consequences." Marshall's gaze darted around the room, searching for any hint of support or sympathy. But he found none, only the accusing stares of those he had wronged. "You can't do this to me," he snarled, his composure crumbling like a house of cards. "I'm family, damn it! Blood is supposed to mean something." Uncle Frank, a stoic man of few words, fixed Marshall with a withering glare. "You forfeited that right when you stole from your own niece. You're no kin of mine." The weight of their collective condemnation seemed to crush Marshall, and for a moment he almost appeared remorseful. But it was a fleeting moment, quickly replaced by a mask of defiance. "Fine," he spat, his voice dripping with venom. "If that's how you want to play it, so be it. But this isn't over, Ivy. You haven't heard the last of me." With that parting shot, he stormed out of the room, leaving a trail of stunned silence in his wake. In the aftermath of his dramatic exit, the family united in a collective resolve to pursue legal action against Marshall. Aunt Judith took the lead, her no-nonsense attitude a steadying force in the midst of the turmoil. "We'll need to gather all the evidence and present it to the authorities," she announced, her tone brooking no argument. "That snake won't slither away from this unscathed." As the wheels of justice began to turn, I found myself pulled into 1,000 different directions, answering questions and providing statements. But through it all, my focus remained on Lena and Grant, ensuring that their emotional well-being was prioritized. "I can't believe Uncle Marshall would do something like this," Lena confided in me, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and sadness. "He was supposed to be someone we could trust." I pulled her into a comforting embrace, my heart aching for the pain she was enduring. "I know, sweetheart. But we'll get through this together, and we'll make sure he faces the consequences of his actions." Grant, ever the pragmatist, took a more analytical approach. "At least we have the evidence to nail him," he pointed out, his brow furrowed in concentration. "He can't worm his way out of this one." As the legal proceedings unfolded, Marshall's web of deceit began to unravel. Each lie and fabrication exposed to the harsh light of truth. It was a slow, agonizing process, but one that was necessary to ensure that justice was served. Through it all, I remained a steadfast pillar of strength for my family, unwavering in my determination to see this through to the bitter end. Marshall's betrayal had shaken us to the core, but it had also forged a newfound unity, a resolve to stand together against those who would seek to tear us apart. As the final verdict was handed down, a sense of catharsis washed over me. Marshall's fate was sealed, his greed and deceit having finally caught up with him. It was a bittersweet victory, tempered by the pain of his betrayal, but a victory nonetheless. And in that moment, I knew that our family had emerged stronger, more resilient than ever before. The scars of Marshall's actions would linger, but they would serve as a reminder of the importance of trust, loyalty, and the unbreakable bonds that true family shared. The courtroom was a battleground, a stage upon which Marshall's misdeeds were laid bare for all to witness. Each damning piece of evidence, every financial record and wire transfer, painted a vivid picture of his greed and betrayal. As the prosecution methodically built their case, Marshall's once confident demeanor crumbled, his mask of arrogance giving way to fear and desperation. Gone was the smooth-talking charmer who had so easily manipulated those around him. In his place sat a broken man, his lies and deceit exposed for all to see. When it was my turn to take the stand, I felt a surge of determination coursing through my veins. This was the moment I had been preparing for, the culmination of months of anguish and turmoil. The prosecutor, a no-nonsense woman with a steely gaze, approached me with a reassuring nod. "Mrs. Lawson, please recount the events leading up to your discovery of the defendant's embezzlement scheme." Drawing a steadying breath, I launched into my testimony, laying out the details with a clarity and precision that left no room for doubt. I recounted the discrepancies in Lena's tuition payments, my growing suspicions, and the eventual uncovering of Marshall's web of deceit. Throughout my testimony, I could feel Marshall's gaze boring into me, a silent plea for mercy or understanding. But I refused to meet his eyes, steadfast in my resolve to see justice served. As the trial progressed, the weight of the evidence became overwhelming. Financial records, witness statements, even the recorded phone call, each piece of evidence added another layer to the damning portrait of Marshall's misdeeds. In a last-ditch effort to salvage his crumbling defense, Marshall took the stand, his eyes wild and desperate. "I never meant for things to go this far," he pleaded, his voice cracking with emotion. "I was just trying to keep my head above water, to provide for my family." The prosecutor was relentless, her questions sharp and incisive. "And you felt justified in stealing from your own niece's college fund to achieve that?" Marshall faltered, his carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of his own lies. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but I swear I was going to pay it all back." The courtroom erupted in a chorus of derisive scoffs, his excuses falling on deaf ears. In the end, the verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. As the judge read out the sentence, a hush fell over the courtroom. Marshall's face drained of color, the realization of his fate finally setting in. "You have been found guilty of embezzlement, fraud, and breach of trust," the judge intoned, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "In light of the severity of your crimes and the damage inflicted upon your own family, I hereby sentence you to 5 years in state prison, followed by a substantial period of probation and financial restitution." The gavel fell with a resounding finality, echoing through the silent courtroom like a death knell for Marshall's once charmed life. As the bailiffs led him away in handcuffs, his gaze found mine one last time. In that moment, I saw a flicker of something. Regret, perhaps, or a fleeting acknowledgement of the pain he had caused. But it was too little, too late. Marshall's disintegration was complete, his greed and deceit having exacted a devastating toll. He had not only lost his freedom but also the respect and trust of those closest to him. In the aftermath of the trial, our family rallied around Lena and Grant, determined to help them heal from the trauma of Marshall's betrayal. Aunt Judith and Uncle Frank took the lead in securing Lena's college fund, ensuring that her dreams of higher education would not be derailed by her uncle's misdeeds. As for me, I found solace in the knowledge that justice had been served, that Marshall's actions had not gone unpunished. It was a bittersweet victory, tinged with the sadness of a family torn asunder, but a victory nonetheless. And through it all, I remained steadfast in my role as the matriarch, a pillar of strength and resilience for my children and extended family. We had weathered the storm, emerging battered but unbroken, our bonds forged anew in the fires of adversity. The aftermath of Marshall's downfall was a whirlwind of emotions: relief, anger, and a strange sense of emptiness. As he began serving his prison sentence, the weight of his betrayal seemed to settle over our family like a heavy shroud. In the weeks and months that followed, I witnessed the toll his actions had taken on Lena and Grant. Lena, once a bright and carefree young woman, became withdrawn and guarded, her trust in others shaken to the core. "How could he do this to us, Mom?" she would ask, her eyes brimming with tears. Uncle Marshall was supposed to be family. I would hold her close, offering what little comfort I could. "I don't have all the answers, sweetheart, but we'll get through this together. We're stronger than his greed and lies." Grant, ever the pragmatist, channeled his anger into his studies, throwing himself into his computer science coursework with a renewed fervor. "At least we got that scumbag locked up," he muttered one evening, his brow furrowed in concentration. "He won't be able to hurt anyone else." Aunt Judith and Uncle Frank rallied around us, offering their unwavering support and guidance. Together, We navigated the legal intricacies of securing Lena's college fund, ensuring that Marshall's misdeeds would not derail her educational dreams. "That boy has brought shame upon this family," Aunt Judith declared, her voice thick with disappointment. "But we won't let his actions define us." As the dust settled, I found myself reflecting on the painful journey that had led us to this point. The betrayal, the emotional turmoil, the arduous pursuit of justice. It had all taken a toll, both emotionally and financially. But through it all, a newfound resilience had emerged, a steely determination to rebuild and forge ahead, stronger than ever before. "We made it, Mom," Lena murmured one evening, her eyes shining with a glimmer of hope. "We survived Uncle Marshall's lies." I smiled, feeling a sense of pride swell in my chest. Yes, we did, and will continue to thrive despite his best efforts to tear us down. In the years that followed, our family became a beacon of strength and unity in the face of adversity. Lena graduated with honors, her college fund intact and her future bright. Grant excelled in his studies, securing a coveted internship at a renowned tech company, and I, the steadfast matriarch, watched over them with a renewed sense of purpose. Marshall's betrayal had been a harsh lesson, but one that had ultimately brought us closer together, strengthening the bonds that truly mattered. As for Marshall himself, he faded into a distant memory, a cautionary tale of greed and the consequences of breaking sacred trusts. His name was seldom spoken, that his existence relegated to the shadows of our family's history. On the rare occasions when he did cross our minds, it was with a mix of pity and contempt. Pity for the man he had become, consumed by his own greed and deceit, and contempt for the pain he had inflicted upon those who once loved him. But we refused to let his actions define us. Instead, we channeled our energy into building a new foundation, one built upon the bedrock of trust, loyalty, and an unwavering commitment to one another. And as I looked around at my family, their faces alight with hope and determination, I knew that we had emerged from the crucible of Marshall's betrayal stronger, more resilient than ever before. The scars of his actions would forever be a part of our history, but they would serve as a reminder of the importance of vigilance, of never taking the bonds of family for granted. For in the end, it was those bonds, unbreakable, unwavering, that had carried us through the darkest of times and would continue to guide us towards a brighter future, free from the shackles of greed and deceit.